Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
That some folks might be trickling in, so we'll just kind of get going and let folks come in as they do. But thank you so much for being here with us today at 9 a.m., the first session of this conference. We want to also thank the Housing Oregon Conference for having us and being in this space. My name's Megan Ellertson. I'm the program manager with OHCS for the Moderate-Income Revolving Loan program, also more frequently called the MIRL program. And today I'm joined by Lindy Romero-Gonzalez, our program analyst, and then Jason Mackey, our technical advisor. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about the MIRL program. We're kind of hoping to give you all an overview of what the MIRL program is, get you a little more familiar with it, and then mainly kind of looking more closely from a project-specific perspective about what kind of projects MIRL that are eligible for MIRL, and really kind of diving in more specifically about that eligibility and what that can look like for developers and for project applicants. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Jason here to get us started. Also, too, we'll take some questions at the end. We have a lot of resources, links, flyers. We'll direct y'all to that stuff at the end. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Mackey. Just like to say thank you to everyone here for providing us the opportunity to share with you about the Moderate-Income Revolving Loan program. We are going to go over a lot of information today, hopefully helpful to help describe the program to everybody. We're going to do a brief introduction into the specific standards of the Moderate-Income Revolving Loan program, what we like to call MIRL, how it works, getting started with MIRL. We will take a specific focus on step-by-step for the application process, specifically focused on developers. And then we do have plenty of time provided for questions. So what is this MIRL program that likely everybody in this room has been hearing about? At a really high level, MIRL is a revolving loan fund for cities and counties to boost housing production for moderate income Oregonians at or below 120% of area median income. And so why does MIRL matter? Primarily, MIRL is designed as a gap resource for affordable rental housing and homeownership projects. It provides resources for middle housing development projects, and it also empowers local communities to address their individual housing needs. And a special call out, the MIRL program is a priority for the governor's office and is part of a concerted statewide effort to boost housing production. So how much money are we talking about? MIRL was allocated $75 million from the legislature. $50 million of that is allocated for the first 2 years of the project. After those 2 years, another $25 million will become available. And then 20% of those funds are set aside for rural counties. So in the first 2 years, that would be $10 million set aside for rural counties. And so this is just a simple illustration to visualize the workflow of how MIRL works. So OHCS issues no interest loans to sponsoring jurisdictions. Those can be cities or counties. Then the sponsoring jurisdiction gives a grant to the developer to construct a housing development. The developer then builds that housing development. And once completed, the county tax assessor collects program fees and sends the net program fee to OHCS. And then OHCS uses those fee payments to replenish the revolving loan fund to fund future projects. And so there's several key stakeholders in the MIRL program. The first being sponsoring jurisdictions, which can be a city or a county. The project applicant, which in most cases is going to be the developer. And then in all cases, whether the sponsoring jurisdiction is a city or a county, the county tax assessor plays a critical role in the program. And then ultimately the fee payer, which in most cases will be the developer, but in the case of home ownership projects could ultimately be the homeowner. And so the MIRL program is unique and flexible in several different ways. The first being what eligible costs can be funded through the MIRL program. You can see a list here which includes infrastructure costs, pre-development costs, construction costs, and also land write-downs. And the MIRL program is also flexible in what types of projects are eligible. Affordable rental housing is an eligible project, both for constructing new housing units or converting a non-residential building to residential use. And pretty flexible in construction type, accessory dwelling units, multifamily dwelling complexes, again, rented at a rate affordable to very low or moderate income individuals and families. But the program is also eligible for home ownership projects. Again, with quite a bit of flexibility. Single family homes are an eligible project. All middle housing types, cottage clusters, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. And again, affordable to very low to moderate income individuals and families. And so with that brief overview, I'd like to pass it off to my colleague, Lindy.
There we go. I always give a PSA that I am notorious for talking too fast. So if at any point I am moving a little too quickly, don't hesitate to say something about it. I'm going to have Megan go through my slides because I'm also a fidgeter, so I will click ahead. We're going to go step by step through the application process for a sponsoring jurisdiction. Like Megan and Jason referenced, we are going to have an emphasis on the developer aspects of these. So we'll have some developer specific slides as well, and we'll be able to take additional questions at the end. So getting started with MIRL, how this was designed, that a sponsoring jurisdiction, or an SJ, as you'll see a reference in the slides moving forward, is that the sponsoring jurisdiction should really be engaging with the community about what the local housing needs are. Is that rental housing at maybe 80% AMI instead of 120%? Is that home ownership projects at 80% to 100% AMI as well, area median income, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the local community? This legislation and the program was built with a lot of flexibility for sponsoring jurisdictions to have in order to best facilitate the needs. So with the first step of implementing a local MIRL program, a sponsoring jurisdiction, whether a city or a county, must pass a originating ordinance, and those have to have three critical components. They have to define local site approval, draft a compliance plan for how their implementation of MIRL is going to comply with our program manual and the program aspects, and including what that utility allowance calculation looks like. One question that we get a lot as it relates to the originating ordinance, which we do have a template online, and we'll get into those resources as well. But can OHCS MIRL team, that's how y'all can refer to us, can you take a look at it before we pass it, just to make sure that it can pass with the critical components, and we are more than happy to have eyes on that and work very closely with you. We want to be thought partners in this process, as we do acknowledge there is a lot of flexibility, and we all want to make sure that we're on the right tracks to getting everything passed. So again, those are the 3 critical components that folks do have to have in their originating ordinance. Ready for the next slide? Perfect. And like I said, the sponsoring jurisdiction is really in the driver's seat for developing their own local programs. So this requires them to also build a local application process for developers, which can be unique from sponsoring jurisdiction to sponsoring jurisdiction. There are minimum requirements in our program manual that every program has to have, but if your sponsoring jurisdiction, city or county, would like to see additional aspects, maybe some additional documents that they'd like you to turn in as a developer, things like that, they will be added into their local program. And then the first step to really realize and have the program be established at the local level is them entering into the IGA or intergovernmental agreement with OHCS. If your sponsoring jurisdiction is a city, the county also has to enter into an IGA first with OHCS, and then your city will enter into a master agreement with OHCS to really finalize and wrap up that process for standing up the local program. And as I said, there are some required documents for a project application as it relates to OHCS. So this is everything that we ask your sponsoring jurisdiction to turn in. All of this overlaps with what the developer will be submitting for project applications, as the project applications are approved by the sponsoring jurisdictions and then sent up to us for a completeness check. We have had a couple flags about some of these documents and would love to talk through them if you have any questions. We do meet one-on-one, which we'll talk about again in the resources section of that. And I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. All right, so we've got some responsibilities for the developer because we have so many key stakeholders in this program setup. So first step as a developer is completing that pro forma and a clear demonstration of the but-for test. For MIRL funding, this is gap funding. So but-for means but for this funding, this project would not be realized. So that will be a critical component, and it is even color-coded in the pro forma that we have to make sure it's very clear what that gap need is. And it can range from project to project based on the sources that you have and the funding that you've already collected. After that, and getting all of your ducks in a row for your project application, that's when you'll submit it to your sponsoring jurisdiction, and they will take the time they need to process that, make sure that on their end the project looks good, viable, financially feasible, all of those good things. And once they do that, again, that's when they pass it to us. Right now we have a ballpark of completing construction within 10 years of that grant, 3 years of that grant disbursement. We do have some flexibility built in for construction extensions if that's needed. We all know that construction gets kicked out for a variety of different reasons, so we want to make sure that there's not only the acknowledgement of that, but that flexibility as well. We do have annual reports that are required to OHCS and the sponsoring jurisdiction. The developer is going to submit one report to them, to the sponsoring jurisdiction, and then the sponsoring jurisdiction will submit an annual report to us based on the projects they have online in their jurisdiction. We do have our annual report that the sponsoring jurisdiction submits to us online as well, so folks can take a look at that just to get an idea of what that reporting looks like. Now, this next bullet is especially important: adhering to affordability requirements throughout the life of the grant, loan, or different affordability requirements that your sponsoring jurisdiction may implement in their local program as well. For MIRL, the affordability period is 10 years, the life of the loan, whichever one is longer. But in some engagement spaces that we've been able to have with different sponsoring jurisdictions, it has been thrown out to extend that affordability period past the grant or loan. So that's fantastic because, again, it's addressing community needs and making sure that we have affordable housing for even longer than is required under MIRL. Two key components that we get questions a lot, or about a lot for affordability, is income verification and the sales price. We do have affordability tools on our website as well to help you calculate what that looks like. And then for our last one, we have reimbursing the program fees if we have some non-compliance, or if the project substantially changes in a way that it no longer complies with MIRL. Okay, getting into these affordability requirements just a little bit deeper. At minimum, the projects have to be developed at 120% AMI levels or below. Again, and I just want to make sure that this is almost overemphasized. Sponsoring jurisdictions can set those AMI limits lower if that's what the community needs and that's what they deem as appropriate for the local implementation. So with those requirements, that means that they must be rented and sold at the appropriate AMI level to folks that fit that AMI level as well. So that's where you're seeing that income verification piece as well. And as I referenced in the last slide, that affordability period is a minimum of 10 years or the duration of the loan, whichever one is longer, or if your sponsoring jurisdiction puts additional affordability requirements on that. Okay, so we've been throwing out words like grant amount and loan amount, and why are they different? For the loan calculation, I'm going to get into that piece first because it is the loan that is issued to the sponsoring jurisdiction, and then the sponsoring jurisdiction passes or issues the grant onto the developer. So for the loan calculation, that looks like the grant funds, an amount that is equal to 5% of the grant funds, which is reimbursed to the sponsoring jurisdiction for admin fees, and then you have your 1% of the grant amount that also gets tacked on for the county tax assessor as well. So again, you're making sure that your key stakeholders are acknowledged in that full grant amount as well. So for the grant amount, I want to highlight this project funding first because it's calculated using the pro forma to, again, determine that gap funding that's needed to realize the project, so that but-for test. And using that but-for test, that's going to then go into your amortization schedule, which is automatically going to calculate your max grant amount. And your max grant amount is really only critical in making sure that your gap funding or the funding that you're eligible for under MIRL doesn't exceed the max grant amount, because you'll get the gap amount or the max, just making sure that you don't go over. And just to make sure that it's really clear what that max grant amount, it's your current taxes, the difference between your current taxes and the estimated future value of the property, whatever that difference is, times the life of the loan, just to make sure that we've got all of those taxes calculated and accounted for appropriately. All right, and then we have a program fee to determine as well. So this is what the repayment looks like to your sponsoring jurisdiction and then OHCS. So this program fee is the annual increment, so the grant amount, which is divided by 10, and that's your annual payment every year. And then on top of that, we'll make sure that that 6% gets paid back as well, so we're not leaving any loan funds left out. So 5% that was awarded to the sponsoring jurisdiction and 1% to the county tax assessors encompassed in that. And then we have a 3% escalator that's tacked on there as well, just to take into account inflation that happens every year, and then the fire district fees as well. One question that we get a lot is, so MIRL essentially forgoes taxes on improvements, and who does that encompass essentially? All other districts except for the fire districts are foregone with those taxes on improvements, but the fire district fees do remain whole. Okay, so the developer specifics. Sponsoring jurisdictions process all of their own applications and approve their own applications initially. So following that approval process set forth in the originating ordinance, again, they can have some specifics that they have about approving their approval process. Working with the county tax assessor to determine those program fees, so you know exactly what you're signing up for. And once all of that's done and your sponsoring jurisdiction has approved the application, then it's called a provisionally approved application and comes to OHCS for that completeness check, just to make sure that, again, we've got our ducks in a row and the project is viable and feasible. And in order for us to review that provisionally approved application, the sponsoring jurisdiction goes online to the MIRL website, submits a smart sheet request called an intent to apply, and that kickstarts our review process, where we set up their Procorum Work Center, make sure that they know exactly what needs to be submitted. It's going to match that slide of required documents that we saw, so the pro forma, the program loan request, or PLRs, you'll see that referred to a lot in our documents. and make sure that we've got all of that set up for them. Talking about that program loan request packet, that encompasses all of those documents that were on the slide. I do want to highlight that we have a program loan request form, and then we have the program loan request packet. So I just want to make sure there's no confusion over those as we navigate through this process. So the sponsoring jurisdiction will upload all of those materials to the Procorum Work Center, and I don't know how many of y'all have played telephone within getting things accomplished throughout an application process, but with MIRL, I'm the point of contact as folks are navigating the application process. Folks, I mean sponsoring jurisdictions. So you won't have to play telephone with any of our internal departments as we navigate through that process. If there are any hiccups, you have just me to kind of, again, be that point of contact, wrangle all the things together to make sure we have as seamless of a process as possible. And OHCS does just do that. Review for completeness and just being a little bit redundant about what we require in that program loan request packet, just so it's very, very clear. The highlighted portions are things that may not necessarily come from the developer solely, but the sponsoring jurisdiction should definitely be working on the program loan request form with the developer, since it includes the amortization schedule, but it does require a lot of the sponsoring jurisdiction contact information on there as well. So again, that's one thing that they'll definitely work with folks on. OHCS then is able to approve the application. We'll say it was an A+ application, no speed bumps along the way. And we will then enter into a project-specific intergovernmental agreement with your sponsoring jurisdiction just to sign off on that project. And just for extra clarification, that's the loan agreement, making sure that we have those legal agreements in process. From there, the sponsoring jurisdiction is then able to enter into the grant agreement with the approved applicant developer. And the project award is for 10 to 15 years. The 15 years is kind of the extent. One question that a sponsoring jurisdiction asked as well is if you can build into the originating ordinance a longer loan term. I think one thing we had discussed was maybe 12 years. Absolutely on the table, just again, because of the flexibility that is allowed with this program and really addressing what the community needs for everyone. So we have our loan agreements. We have issued the grant to the developer, or we've collected the funds to issue to the developer. Then the sponsoring jurisdiction has to pass a project-specific ordinance through this. The project-specific ordinance has the project details in that goes through the body that's relevant to the sponsoring jurisdictions. We've heard a couple different ones. And then after that, then the grant is able to be executed. Funds, next slide please, thank you. Funds officially dispersed and, minus that 6% admin fee that goes to the sponsoring jurisdiction and the county tax assessor, just to make sure that that's all accounted for. And after that, then our county tax assessor is going to exempt the housing on improvements made under MIRL. Again, I want to make sure that that's very clear, that fire districts are the only taxing district that remains whole from those improvements. I feel like those bullets are a little redundant, but then the tax assessor does ensure that the property is officially exempted from the tax roll as well. For compliance, really essential for the sponsoring jurisdiction to follow that compliance plan that's established in the originating ordinance. So you'll have your compliance plan in your originating ordinance, and then every project-specific ordinance that gets passed does have to have a compliance narrative from the developer to really outline how the project complies with the local MIRL program, again, because there can be differences from program to program as they're realized. With the sponsoring jurisdiction, like I referenced a couple slides ago, they do have an annual report that they do have to submit to OHCS, which is online already. And then the sponsoring jurisdiction will have separate reports that the developer is turning in. Every year, you're working with the county tax assessor to ensure that the program fees are paid appropriately, just to make sure that they're able to get that net program fee back to OHCS. I think I turn it back over to Jason for this key reminders section.
Thank you, Lindy. I'd just like to validate for everybody in the room, there is a lot of moving parts to the MIRL program. So I'd just like to kind of call out a few key reminders, few key points. In the case of a city acting as the sponsoring jurisdiction, it is required to have the county support. So if we have any city staff in the room, we do recommend and encourage the city to make contact with the county as soon as possible to start building that relationship. Another call out, as Lindy mentioned, the county tax assessor calculates the program fee and the max grant amount. We have several tools available online, so you can kind of get a sense of how those calculations are made. The sponsoring jurisdiction creates the application process. So again, just calling out the fact that there's quite a bit of flexibility built into the MIRL program and how a sponsoring jurisdiction can choose to implement it in their local community. The local program does need to obviously meet the MIRL program standards, but from there, if a city, for example, wanted to define a geographic boundary or have a lower AMI or things of that nature that better fit the specific needs of their community, that is a possibility. And, you know, moving into the future, fine-tuning that program locally. And then just a call out, it is the responsibility of the sponsoring jurisdiction to provide annual reporting to OHCS and ensure ongoing compliance and monitoring of the program. And just a couple points specific to developers, you know, just to re-emphasize, a sponsoring jurisdiction needs to implement the program locally before the developer has an opportunity to apply. So really the next step is for the local jurisdiction in your area to adopt a program. But we do anticipate that developers will sort of lead in the advocacy to their local jurisdictions. So again, a recommendation is to start that conversation with your local municipality so that they can understand what it is you're looking for from the program and how you guys can work as partners. Prepare project application documents. So again, as Lindy mentioned, there is a developer-specific project application. There's several pieces to that. All of that information is available on the website. The pro forma is an important document as part of the project application, specifically the but-for test. Again, we have a template pro forma available on the website that you can use as a tool to do those calculations. And in all cases, meeting affordability requirements is important. In the case of affordable rental housing, we do have published rent limits. And in the case of homeownership projects, we have several different tools for calculating sales price and things like that. Just a call out that in the most recent legislative session, Senate Bill 48 was passed, what we call the MIRL Technical Fix Bill. Several important changes to the MIRL program are going to be the result of that legislation. This is going to be very brief, but it does let cities and counties make loans instead of grants to developers. It does also offer alternatives to property tax increment financing for loan repayment, so it adds some more options for the fee payment. And the OHCS staff is currently working through how we're going to implement the new legislation into the program. So stay tuned for how that might affect the way anybody is approaching the MIRL program. And the most important point personally that I would like to call out here is OHCS staff now does offer the opportunity for developers and sponsoring jurisdictions to request one-on-one technical assistance. And I think this is going to be helpful for anybody in the room who wants to continue to learn more about the MIRL program. You can go online, request a meeting with both Lindy and I, and the intent of the meeting is really to make it yours. We can approach it any way you would like. If you want to ask questions, we can start with questions. If you'd like this presentation again, we can give the presentation again. If you'd like to invite your partners or sponsoring jurisdiction, anybody who wants to be in the room, we can make that happen. We'd really like to be thought partners with you. Again, just calling back to the fact that there's a lot of moving parts. We want to be partners in the success of implementing the MIRL program in your local community. We do have a robust toolkit, lots of resources there. I encourage everybody to take a look. Things such as template originating ordinances for sponsoring jurisdictions, and then lots of resources available on the web page. I'll just call out a few. We do have a questions and comments portal. I encourage everybody, if you have a quick question, even just a comment, feedback, we would like to hear everybody's experience. So please send your questions and comments. Quite a few different resources for just getting general information such as videos, FAQs. Again, a lot of intention around sort of the affordability tools. I do think those are helpful, especially to look at and maybe bring questions into, say, a one-on-one technical assistance meeting. So again, I encourage everybody there. And then several ways to sort of like continue the process in terms of submitting an intent to apply or initiating a master agreement. And so I think we're all anticipating questions, so we're happy to dive into those.
Did everybody hear the question? What's the interest rate of the loan? 0%. You got that one? Okay, cool.
Thanks. Yeah, great question. Yeah, it is a 0% interest rate loan.
Yep, hold on. Let me get this to you.
So, reporting on the homeownership projects after completion, what's the developer's responsibility? I'm assuming there's no income verification post-occupancy, so does the developer have any responsibility after the project is completed?
Great question. And I think we get a lot of questions similar around compliance. So when it comes to the compliance related to the developer or the project applicant, and you articulate a good point of at some point that home will be sold to a home buyer. So part of the role of the sponsoring jurisdiction is to ensure compliance through the duration of the 10 years or whatever the duration is of the loan. So even if it has been sold, it is their responsibility to ensure that that compliance is met, ensure that they might include like some affordability covenants in their projects and make sure that the affordability is maintained throughout. So it is the responsibility of the sponsoring jurisdiction to enforce that compliance. When it comes to the reporting of the developer or the project applicant back to the sponsoring jurisdiction, there's a few requirements that we as OHCS ask for in that. However, it is up to the sponsoring jurisdiction about how they want to collect that information, how detailed they want to get with that. Much of it probably could be collected kind of very lightly. So I feel like the collection piece on the information or the reporting from the developer to the sponsoring jurisdiction is sort of minimal through the project app.
Yeah, just one thing that I want to add to that is that, especially for home ownership, during that affordability period, really making sure that income is verified and that the AMI limits that the household that purchases does meet the AMI limits. If it is sold within the affordability period as well, it does have to get checked again. You don't have to do any yearly income verifications that they remain eligible. But again, at those sale points, you want to make sure that they're being sold to 120% or the AMI level that's deemed for your sponsoring jurisdiction.
Good morning. Thank you. Great presentation. Question, in terms of sponsoring jurisdictions, is there a deadline for that to apply? Is it a rolling deadline? And what has the sign-up been so far?
Yeah, great question. And I know there's so much to touch on in MIRL, but there's no deadline, there's no limit. So any city, any county in Oregon is welcome and encouraged to become a sponsoring jurisdiction. It would just be on their own timeline. Funds get allocated on a first come, first serve basis. So, you know, there's kind of a push if you want to get your sponsoring jurisdiction set up, and then you can access funds quickly that way. But there's no limitation or deadline. Great question.
Hi, I noticed in one of the slides that there was a need for a BOLI determination letter. Are there pathways to an exemption from BOLI prevailing wages under either the rental or ownership lane?
Not right now. That is required that you do get the BOLI letter, the BOLI determination letter. So as long as you get the determination letter and submit it to us. But as of right now, there's not exemptions to it, but we'll definitely note it down and explore an option if possible. But for now, that is part of the requirement for MIRL.
Actually, can I ask a follow-up on that? I don't know if I didn't ask that very well. The question isn't about whether we need to go to BOLI. The question is whether the projects will, the determination is going to say, yeah, these are funds of a public agency. There's nothing in statute that says that you're exempt, ergo this project is going to be paying BOLI wages. That's what I meant to ask.
Yes, that is one flag that we've had from several folks, is that prevailing wage could be a barrier. So when and if that happens, not that we have necessarily a pathway to escape that, but we want to be thought partners in how to make this work efficiently. So coming up with some creative solutions, we'd be more than happy to help with.
Can you talk a little bit more about what can be included in the pro forma, since the amount is calculated off of that? So I'm thinking soft costs like administration, marketing for the project, GC fee, developer fee, that kind of thing.
Yes, those things are included in the performa. We have both of our performas online as well. We have a rental performa and a homeownership performa. So you'll be able to see particularly in our rental performa, a side-by-side of what the funding looks like with and without MIRL, to really make that evident as to what the gap funding is needed for, and how much it's needed, right? But you'll have lines to list out all of those costs, soft costs and those hard costs, and the sources and uses pieces, yes.
And a follow-up to that, do you set limits on those things? Because with the you know, if you're at a 10% GC fee and you aren't making that calculation and that looks like what you need, can you bump up to 15 or?
That's a great question. We don't have limits that we've necessarily discussed on anything. I think that's a fantastic question to follow up on. I'd love to get your contact information just to make sure that that's a solid no, that we don't have a limit. We are going to be working with our production team to make sure that all of the costs that are listed on the performa are reasonable. So just making sure that we're not seeing anything crazy in the performa. So that's where we could have a flag, but again, reasonable.
Thank you so much for this. So I know that statewide the pickup of MIRL has been slower than anticipated or desired. And I know in our own jurisdiction in Central Oregon, the sponsoring jurisdictions that could have been basically said, no, this is too complicated, we're not doing it. So I really appreciate this step by step, but I'm wondering, why do you think the pickup has been slower than anticipated? And what can all of us do in this room to help kind of see those barriers and overcome them in advance?
Awesome question. Thanks for, kind of laying it out. And I think there's probably a long answer to that, but like you mentioned, and I think kind of as we talked a lot, I think you heard us all mention, like, MIRL can be really, really flexible. It's very broad. There's a lot of options when it comes to MIRL, and I think we've seen that for folks of, like, there's so many things we could do with MIRL, and trying to understand how to make it work. And so, and I'll probably let these two as well add to what I'm saying. But I think for us right now, like as the MIRL team at OHCS, we definitely hear that. We're trying to take in a lot of feedback right now to try to help reduce some of the hesitancy about jumping into MIRL. And I think a lot of it comes with helping people have a clear vision, or helping them kind of come to a clear vision of how they want to use MIRL, what kind of projects that they already know of that can kind of fit for MIRL. Because I think what we've realized is a lot of folks do have projects that can actually would be benefited by MIRL, and they just aren't sure yet. So part of that for us is making the setup of MIRL clearer, helping provide more templates, more materials, more training, helping folks feel a little bit more confident with how they could use MIRL. But I think to your point, we've noticed that a lot of folks are like, there is almost so much flexibility. It's hard for me to like imagine this without some like guardrails in some ways. And so part of what we're trying to do is make sure that we can help people feel confident about this, and kind of harness something that is has so much flexibility and so much broadness to use for their own sponsoring, their own communities, and how we can make this work for them. So I think we've reiterated this a bit, but we really encourage folks to come and meet with us and like use us as thought partners in this, of like, hey, I want to do this thing with MIRL, but in my community we have X restriction, or we have this thing. Is this going to get in the way? Is it an issue? Can we get it? Like, can we make this work? And I think we've been able to have some of those conversations with folks successfully. So, yeah, that was a long, but I can.
That was fantastic. Just one thing to add is that this is a brand new program that's very different from the rest of the OHCS program. So it's always scary being that first person to implement. I will say we have gotten our first originating ordinance passed by Coos Bay, working through their master agreement process right now. So one thing that we've heard a lot of is, again, like Megan said, I don't really know what the MIRL funding looks like. So we are working on internal development resources in order to demonstrate what MIRL could look like. More to come with that. So we are working on internal barrier mitigation as well, just to make sure that we can provide as much clarity and as much support as possible, and can't emphasize enough to reach out to us. And yeah, don't hesitate to schedule a meeting.
Sorry, I had one more thing to add, and I think I realized when you asked that question, I didn't fully answer the question from someone in the back about current usage of MIRL. Like Lindy mentioned, we do have one sponsoring jurisdiction who has an originating ordinance set up, in I think maybe 2 or 3 more that are in process. But like we said, funds are kind of first come, first served basis. This is a revolving loan fund, but currently no projects yet have used the MIRL fund. But like Lindy said, we're trying to get some examples, and then also hopefully with that kind of initial project coming through, it'll be a little bit easier for people to kind of see what that could look like in the vision.
I just wanted to take a moment to really echo what Megan and Lindy are saying. In some ways, the MIRL program is broad and flexible enough to cause some confusion, while at the same time being highly technical, which can be intimidating. We're really here to build a relationship with you. You know, we're not approaching the MIRL program as just like here's the program manual, it's turnkey, launch it. So we'd really like to hear from anybody who may be an advocate for the program. If there's a specific barrier in your community, please bring it to us. We do have, we have legislation that we need to follow, but as a team, we really want to be as flexible as we can be. So again, just another call out for the one-on-one technical assistance. We would really like to build that relationship with you. And just to be fully transparent, especially for smaller rural communities, we know that staff capacity is a challenge. Please don't let that discourage you. If there's a way that we can hear everybody's experience and how we might be able to provide a mitigant for the barrier of capacity, the more we know, the better that we can help support you. So great question.
I have a structural question. What happens if the increment during the amortization period doesn't result in a full repayment of the loan?
So technically speaking, if like for example, if fire district fees change during the time frame, that might adjust the proportion of the payment that goes back to the loan. So the remainder of that loan would then have to trickle over the 10 years to finalize the payment, because we won't adjust the full amount that you're owed back, the program fee, just the proportion of like the fire district fee. If that adjusts, if that levy increases, then the rollover of the remaining loan balance would go after the term. So it might
10
have to be
years might
extended.
turn into 11 years or something like that.
Right. It may have to be extended.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Any other? Oh, good.
Hi, I've got a question for the audience. I'm wondering if there's any potential sponsoring jurisdictions in the room. Can folks raise their hands if you're a sponsoring jurisdiction? No? How about any developers who really need help convincing a sponsoring jurisdiction like Bend? Okay. We would love to talk to you after the panel up at the front.
Of course. And just to kind of jump off that, I think Jason brought this up, but you know, if you are a developer and you have a project in your community that you're like, hey, this may help me finish this project, right? MIRL is gap funding, right? You need just a little bit to make this pencil at an affordable rate. And you're not sure, you're like, hey, I don't even know if my city or my county knows about this thing. We definitely encourage you to chat with your county or your city. Come chat with us. We'd be happy to help you think through this. We'd be happy to help have conversations, present MIRL information to your city or county to kind of say, here's what MIRL is. It seems like this project could pencil for MIRL if we can make this happen, if you're interested, and be partners with you all as you approach your city or your county in thinking about MIRL. Like we mentioned, MIRL is really the city and county's program. They implement this program. They are the ones that hold it, but we can definitely help them understand how they can use it to support y'all.
Given the lack of sponsoring jurisdictions in the room, are you going to be doing a version of this presentation at League of Cities in a few weeks?
I don't think that we will be presenting at League of Cities.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
If we advocate for you, would you go and do it? Because I feel like the jurisdictions need to hear this. So it's good to know that you're not on the docket. And
yeah, of course we would be happy to be in any room. We'd be happy to present to anyone. So and I think too we'll be kind of trying to post some recorded info sessions to try to make it a little bit easier as well. Particularly for sponsoring jurisdictions. Yeah,
I'm assuming that as the experts, you can give us an idea of how many jurisdictions have actually signed up.
I think we're still trying to get a gauge. We have a lot of people interested having those kind of ongoing conversations and trying to understand like what's going to kind of tip them into the committing to it. I think right now, I don't know how many we like.
So, like I said, Coos Bay is already signed up. We're working through their master agreement. Super, super excited about that. And I would ballpark, we've got 4 sponsoring jurisdictions that are real on the cusp of having their originating ordinance. So I'm really, really hopeful that over the next couple months, we'll see those originating ordinances come through along with their master agreement request.
Can I ask if one of those is Tillamook County?
Did you say Tillamook? Yes.
I just also wanted to call out, we are actively meeting with sponsoring jurisdictions. We've probably had 20 one-on-one meetings at this point now with sponsoring jurisdictions. So any opportunity that we have to talk with staff, we would like to take it. So sponsoring jurisdictions are becoming more aware. And I may sound like a broken record here, but if there's any developers in the room who want to approach their sponsoring jurisdiction, maybe they're not aware of it or they're initially apprehensive, or we will proactively make outreach to them if you provide us your experience.
I'm so sorry. I know we've got one more question, but one thing I want to add to that is we absolutely acknowledge that MIRL is very complex to kind of regurgitate to someone else. So if there's a city council opportunity that folks need a representative at, please reach out to us as well.
And with those sponsoring jurisdiction conversations, is it more productive when they come with like a project and a project in hand, or is it more just high level, this is the program, this is what you can do with it?
I think that's a great question, and I think what we've noticed is that folks that are sponsoring jurisdictions that are coming with projects already in mind seem to be able to kind of grasp this process a lot quicker because there's something tangible that they can kind of say, I already have this project. I think if I want to do this MIRL program and I can see how this might actually work for something very tangible, that has definitely helped cities and counties kind of pursue this. So if you do even have a project in mind in your community that, maybe it could work for MIRL, maybe it won't work for MIRL, but if you are interested in approaching your sponsoring jurisdiction with a project, that I feel like that has been really successful in terms of making MIRL make sense for folks as they're approaching it. But we are happy to have kind of that overlying conversation about what is MIRL from a sponsoring jurisdiction's perspective. How would they do this? How would they set this up? How would they work with you all? And then also, like we mentioned, our goal is to try to give some examples of projects that could be used and shown as like, here's what this could look like for you. So definitely a good call out.
If I could just expand really briefly, it's actually been really interesting in meetings, one-on-one meetings, to hear how many different combinations of ideas and approaches. We've had all the way from housing staff at a municipality come directly to us, very excited, no developer in mind, no project in mind, and we've had very motivated developers trying to encourage their sponsoring jurisdiction who may be sort of initially apprehensive. So the full spectrum of experiences throughout the state. To just maybe dig a little deeper into it, at a point, elected officials in the sponsoring jurisdiction will need to make a decision to pursue the program. Staff will need to have some level of advocacy, and I do think it is very helpful when presenting to council to have a project in mind to help the understanding of the elected officials. So the synergy between developers and sponsoring jurisdictions to launch the program is going to be important.
Sorry, I am full of questions, but I have was hoping you could expand a little bit on prevailing wage and the role of BOLI. You had mentioned that you're willing to partner with developers. Did I catch that correctly? Or is there tools in your toolkit that can help with making sure that requirements are met, or any details that we might miss?
I can jump in and then pass it to them, but for us and for our current statute of like what we require as OHCS is that the determination is made by BOLI if their determination on prevailing wage for your project specifically. Beyond that, and from an OHCS perspective, we don't necessarily have a requirement. We have heard it flagged a bit about how that might make it potentially difficult for projects to kind of get pushed into being able to be used for MIRL. So it is something that we're exploring to try to understand what we can help support on, and if there's ways we can help folks. If that, with that case, if that is the case, how can we help you in other areas to either mitigate some of the barrier that might feel on a project. But for now, in terms of our requirements, it is just getting that determination, whether prevailing wage applies or not, and submitting that to us. But I don't know if either of you have a different.
This won't be entirely helpful, and I am by no means an expert on BOLI. I just want to call out the program manual does define some specific standards around BOLI, so it's helpful to just at least be aware of the BOLI information and standards that is available in the program manual.
Hey, I have two, if that's okay. One is, it seems like a county definitely needs to be a sponsoring jurisdiction because of the tax, property tax thing. But what about a regional government instead of a city? Is that potentially something possible?
Great question. And yeah, just to clarify the front end piece. So if, there are counties that it can be jurisdictions, the city can also be a jurisdiction as well. Their partnership with the county would come in the form of the tax roll, right? So the job of exempting the taxes and then ensuring that the tax payments get made back in terms of the program fee. So we're kind of seeing both happen, cities or counties. There are possibilities for a county to say, hey, we don't want to do this program, but our city does, and they can do it for us essentially, or oversee the program as a whole, inclusive of our city. That's allowable. I don't think we've actually explored the idea of a regional government piece, but I think we might be limited by legislation and by statutes, so we might have to look at in terms of like the bill itself. Understanding if that would even be a possibility, but we're happy to ask the question if that's going to help make folks kind of interested in moving forward. We've heard a lot of folks talk about kind of regionally pooling resources in terms of program setup, maybe aligning how they want to set up the program so that they're not kind of recreating anything, or kind of making it consistent amongst their region, and have had conversations with like economic development districts about the how that can kind of be regionally coordinated. But specifically for a sponsoring jurisdiction to be kind of a regional, we'd have to look into it, but I'm not 100% sure that would be a yes.
Okay.
But great question.
Thanks. And I guess my other question would just be, you mentioned the max amount of the grant is the expected tax minus the current tax times the term of the loan. Is there a benefit then for like public sector to purchase property and bring that tax level down to zero before partnering with a developer to develop that property? Would that kind of boost the grant amount theoretically?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if you have a better response, but the max amount is kind of there to ensure that you're not bypassing the amount that you would be paying in property taxes anyway, right? Because you're kind of paying, instead of those exempted taxes, you're paying back the fee. So the max is there to ensure that you're not kind of going above and beyond that what you would have paid. But the real gap amount is going to be kind of your grant amount, and then that amount needs to fall within the max range. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't know if either of you have a...
This is just a thought. I don't know if it's really hitting your question. Currently, MIRL cannot be layered with other tax exemption tools. I would be curious to learn more about what you're envisioning.
Oh yeah, so I work at Metro. We purchase property like in a land bank situation. So when we buy it, it's we don't pay taxes on it, but eventually we'll sell it or convey it to a developer who could pay taxes on it. So if part of the grant amount is based off of like the pre-developed tax roll amount, and if it's owned by a government, that amount is zero, does that help boost the amount?
Yeah, I want to be really careful not to speculate. My first thought is likely not, but again, we want to think creatively and find a way to yes. So love to get your contact information.
A good topic for a one-on-one. Cool. Thank you.
I have a similar question. Well, his question raised a question in me. I guess one of our project that we're working on in Eugene, and I know we've talked already, is a vacant piece of land. We're doing it for affordable homeownership. The current value of the land is such that it's just a vacant piece of land that's always been vacant. We're going to be doing a subdivision, which raises the value of the land. But you're saying that this property tax exemption is just the value of improvements. And so our question, I know we've posed it before, is can we also capture that increase in the value of the land with the improvements to get a higher grant amount? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I think part of this would be maybe more of specific to your tax assessor. So part of the role of the tax assessor is to help you estimate those property tax amounts, and kind of make that determination. But we recognize that like that might be locally determined because tax assessors kind of would potentially include those. Some would and some wouldn't, even in the current valuation of the property. So it would technically kind of be based on your jurisdiction and the tax assessor that is partnered in that to do those calculations. And from what we understand, whatever that they decide would be how the process would look like for your community.
Perfect. My follow-up question about taxes is, so you said that you can't layer property tax exemptions. That makes sense. Is it the expectation then that we continue to get the property tax exemption on the land that we get? So we use the community land trust model for homeownership, and we're able, as the owner of the land trust, get property tax exemption on the land, and the homeowners only pay property taxes on the vertical improvement. Can we forego that property tax exemption on the land for 10 years to increase the amount of MIRL? And I'm curious if that is something that you would decide, or the tax assessor, the local tax assessor, would decide.
This is a good question. We'd have to explore it a little bit more. I'm not 100% sure. I think we'd have to double check and get back to you if that's okay. A creative thought definitely from MIRL. And I mean, it's a perfect example of kind of the questions that we kind of hear and where we're like, okay, we'll go back, check what we know in terms of like rules and policies, and then circle back with y'all. So thank you. Are we at time?
Got about 9 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
I had just hopefully just a clarifying question that I was tracking from the beginning. Just want to make sure that I'm following the correct number of IGAs that are needed. So if a sponsoring jurisdiction is a city, the county needs an IGA first, followed by the city, and then subsequently the project will need an IGA as well. So we're tracking at least 3 if it's a city. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, there's the master agreement, the IGA, and then the loan agreement. One thing I do want to just mention, we do, I know we had a QR code up, let me see if I can go back, up there, but we also have physical flyers if you're interested. We're happy to pass those around, or you can come up and take one. It has kind of the quick facts of MIRL that we covered, as well as the QR code, and just some other resources. So if you're interested, we do have that physical flyer as well available. Okay, well, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate all the questions. If you had specific questions for us, we'd be happy to explore them more. And thank you again for, coming through this journey with us at 9 a.m. through MIRL. And we really, really appreciate you all being here. Thanks.